Hi. I'm Yasmin. So tonight, along with Baris and Salome, we're going to tell you a bit about our special category of user at Google Ideas. But first things first, how many people here have heard of Google Ideas before this meetup? By show of hands. I'd say a third, maybe half. So for the rest of you, Google Ideas, and one person that changed their mind at the last minute, you did know about Google Ideas. Thanks for having your vote recorded. So Google Ideas is Google's think/do tank. So our user is the one that's having kind of the hardest time, users in distress, people who are living through conflict or repression. And for me, that's particularly meaningful because I'm from a country that is squarely in the repression bucket, which is Iran. So in countries like Iran and Syria and North Korea, people are in threat not just because they might be persecuted for being part of religious minorities or ethnic minorities, but also because of their sexual preferences, and really for having independent thought. And for people in these countries, they might have their internet password, they might be tortured for their internet password, or in prison, their families might be harassed or hacked. And when you think about users in these types of environments, you probably think that it sounds pretty bad, but like really far away and not a problem that affects me at all. But when we think about the next 3 billion people that are coming online, so there are 3 billion people online today. In the next decade, we think that number is going to more than double. This is the heat map of internet, the rate of change of internet penetration. When we think about where the next 3 billion people are coming online, we see that it's exactly the same areas where conflict is common and where repression is rife. That's pretty dramatic. Not to trivialize conflict and repression, but these challenges have been around since the beginning of time. The thing that's different now is, of course, the internet. So the thing that we think about is the fact that over the next decade, it's not just that conflict and repression are going to persist in the physical world. They're going to take on entirely new forms online. So as a company, we are doing a lot to bring access to the next 3 billion, to get the world online. And you may have heard of, this is a picture of a loon balloon. So you may have heard of Project Loon or Project Fiber, for example. But our team is asking the question, what happens once access is there? Who's thinking about delivering kind of safe and free-flowing information to the world? So we get the privilege at Google Ideas of kind of looking at a challenge that is really complex, that probably will be mainstream for users tomorrow. So I want to introduce you to one of our users. This is Dilshad Othman. So when you think about hockey stick growth, you can kind of look at the death toll in Syria. There are more than 220,000 people who have died and 7 million people who are displaced. The country's war-torn, there's a brutal dictator, a monstrous Islamist group who are winning territory in this long tail of kind of armed rival militia. So Dilshad is one of the refugees. Before the conflict in 2011, he led a technology movement to help the opposition. He fled in 2013, and he noticed, once he'd come to America, he noticed a tweet from a man he knew in Damascus about a Scud missile having been fired. And Dilshad served in the military in Syria, and he knew a bit about Scud missiles. He knew that they were slow, heavy, short-range ballistic missiles. And he actually knew where this missile was headed and how long it would take to land. 8 minutes. And he thought about those 8 minutes, and he obviously knew that he couldn't change the course of the Scud missile, but he wondered if he could still change the course of events. So he developed an online early warning system for Scud missiles called EMPTER. The input was eyewitness testimonies of Scud missiles being fired. The site plotted the course of the trajectory of the Scud missile and where it would land. And the output was phone calls, SMS, and emails to civilians in the strike zone. So within its first 24 hours, 16,000 people had signed up to the site, and including 2 news stations. And this is in a country where there are regular power outages. So EMPTER is a really cool example of how information empowers. Even if it's just to tell people to get the hell out of somewhere, it saves lives. And there are also some other takeaways. Firstly, that necessity drives innovation. Secondly, that in these horrible places we hear about in the news, there are developers and they have time to work on these problems. And thirdly, that innovation in these types of circumstances is literally the difference between life and death. So developers plus necessity plus time equals innovation that saves lives.
What's the name of the site again?
AYMTA. OK, so what does this mean in practice for Google Ideas? That's a missile. This is our moonshot. By show of hands, has anyone heard the term moonshot before? Oh, great. More people than heard of Google Ideas. Not everyone there. So moonshot is it's kind of a term that we use a lot at Google Ideas, that refers to a very audacious goal that you think, like going to the moon, that you think you can achieve within a decade. So ours is to end repressive censorship within a decade. And we're going to share with you some concrete examples tonight about some of the projects that we think can help get us there, Proxied and an initiative called Project Shield. But let me paint a picture for you before I hand over. So this is the same map that I showed before. It's a heat map of repression online. The darker the color, the greater the extent of repression. So black is the most repressive countries in the world. One of them in the middle is Iran, where I mentioned that I was from. So Iran, I think it's sixth from the bottom in the rankings of freedom. It also has like an Islamist government. More than half of its population are connected to the internet. So it's really kind of trailblazing in terms of developing the digital repression toolkit. Websites are blocked in Iran, as you might imagine. They're also throttled. There's also types of attacks that aren't even obvious to users, like man-in-the-middle attacks. But you really have to use your imagination to understand what it's like to be a user of the internet in a country like Iran. My cousin is in Iran. I left Iran when I was young. I still have friends and family who are there. And I talk to my cousin a lot. And I ask him about his experience using the internet. I ask him if he isn't scared. This is a kind of quote from him. But he says, of course, I'm scared. But what can I do? I have no other options. Just in the last month, there were 5 users, five Iranians that were sentenced to 20 years in prison just for using Facebook. Bloggers are routinely imprisoned and tortured and die. And the cyber police, as they have come to be known in Iran, have really earned their reputation for being really scary and ruthless. So people in countries like Iran have to choose either don't be online, be offline, or be online but be unsafe. And these types of challenges are the ones that we think about a lot at Google Ideas. And I'm going to hand over to Salome to kind of tell you how technology can help address them.
Proxied is an open source project developed by University of Washington and seeded by Google Ideas. And I'm a software engineer at this project. So in addition to Yazi's points, I want to show you one example. So I want to go to a New York Times website. And beautiful, it loads. It's now blocked. Great. Scrolling down. Does anyone see anything suspicious here? What does it say? So obviously, New York Times is not writing about this meetup being canceled. And this is a malicious content injected by some third parties, written by Evil Eve. So I think this is one of the scariest examples, right? We trust the source, and someone can just randomly inject something that is not coming actually from New York Times. So what is the first thing that comes to our mind when we go to a country where something is blocked? So first thing is proxy servers. Here on the picture, we have users in a restricted or unsafe environments, and we have some content that's in some other in the free world, and the access to it is blocked. So we find the proxy server, and we connect to the content through a proxy server. What are the known challenges for this scenario? There are two problems with this. One is scale. So once the proxy server becomes very popular, the adversary can just block proxy server in one click of a button. And it wouldn't even cost them anything. The second problem is trust. Who runs this proxy server? Are they malicious themselves? Are they stealing any information? Are they monitoring the content, the websites that you're visiting? So there's really a big problem of trust. So how do we solve this? We solve this by building a distributed proxy. We have users in a restricted or unsafe environments, and we have users in safe environments. So let's go back to the Yaz's point. So in a show of hands, like, does anyone know anybody who's either in orange, red, or black country? And are you willing to give them access to the information that's blocked for them? Right. So this is actually our model, right? So everyone seems to know someone, and people who are in these countries tend to have some relatives or someone in this country who experienced the freedom, and they want to share this freedom to their relatives. So we have so the model is the users in these unsafe environments connect to their friends in a safe environment, and they access content through them. And those googly eyes, the adversary that is trying to find a way to block the content, but they can't because there's no one centralized proxy server that they can cut. They either have to block the whole internet or just access to the outside world, which we think they will not do. So I would like to demo how uProxy works. So I sign it using Facebook. You can sign in either Facebook or Google or both. And I have a list of friends. This on top, by the way, is myself. I can also proxy through other instances of myself. So for example, if you're traveling outside of the country, you can leave your computer on here in New York and then proxy through yourself anytime. So right now, I will proxy through my friend Lucas. OK, took a few seconds, but it worked. So now we can try to go on New York Times again. And the malicious content is gone. It's actual New York Times. Yeah. What actually happens when I click Start Proxying? What actually happens there? So initially, this is the most simplified view of what we do. And we have Alice and Bob on two sides. So initially, they exchanged the very little information on Facebook or Google. Like, we're using Facebook or Google because so far we only have these two social networks. They exchanged the information about the IP address and port and very little information via social networks. And once they have that, they can establish a peer-to-peer connection using WebRTC API. And from then on, we actually don't use social networks for anything. So basically, we only need social networks to find or discover your friends and to exchange as a signaling channel for initial exchange of information. So once we establish the connection, what happens? So suppose I type the New York Times in my browser. So when you type New York Times something in your browser, it goes to your local SOX5 proxy server, and requests are redirected to Bob via using WebRTC API. Bob makes a request to, in this case, YouTube or New York Times, gets the contact and sends all the contact back to the Alice, and magically shows up on the Alice's browser. So the cloud and the malicious weird eyes on the page is the adversary who's either trying to block this content or who's trying to find out what you're doing. And the reason why they can't do that because all the content is encrypted and obfuscated. So we mentioned that the traffic between Alice and Bob is encrypted. And my favorite part about uProxy is that it's obfuscated. We can make this traffic look like random UDP traffic, and this is already in works. But we are trying to work on improving it and trying to make it look like any other traffic, something that looks absolutely benign and something that adversary is not willing to block. For example, if all this traffic look like you're just Skyping with your friend outside of your country, probably the government would not want to block that, because that means they would have to block all the outside communications, like all the Skype traffic as well. There's another point of metric collections. We do, so the whole slide is about the security. The metrics collection is done using a report tool. I don't know if any of you know what report tool is, and I won't dive into this too much. But basically, first of all, it is absolutely opt-in, so you don't have to opt in if you don't feel comfortable. But even if you do, the metrics collection is done in a way that we don't know. And if any individual reports something, we don't know whether the value is true or false. Like, we don't know whether it's correct. But overall, statistically, it yields the correct data. In addition to that, in the submit feedback, we also have, I don't have this on the slide, but we also have an option to submit feedback, and we'll be very appreciative if you do. And all the feedback, all the logs are anonymized, and we remove all the personal information from the logs. And if you're willing to get involved, you can install uProxy at uproxy.org and try it with your friends, share it with your friends, and submit feedback, please. Or contribute to the, it's absolutely open source, so contribute to it. There's a GitHub link. Or join mailing lists on uProxy Discuss. That's it. So basically, by doing this, we think that we can solve the problem of you being able to access any server. But what if adversary could bring the server down? And my teammate Baris will talk about how to solve that issue.
Well, thank you so much, Salome. That was a great explanation of uProxy. I'd like to talk to you about Project Shield. In Project Shield, we're aiming at protecting freedom of speech from denial of service attacks. Very important. By the way, let me introduce myself very quickly. I'm Baris Yuksel. I've been working at Google Ideas for about a year now, and this is my 7th year at Google. I worked at Maps and Google Search before, and this is by far the most exciting project that I worked on, and it's most impactful. It's fantastic to see people who benefit from our work. So, denial of service attack. We're at 187, 111 8th Avenue, or 97 9th Avenue. This is our web page. We put it on the map. We start a web server. Let's assume that we start a web server. We're just an independent newspaper, and we're going to just talk about what's happening in the office, around the office. So then we put up our web server. Let's say we put up Apache, and then we put it up on the internet, and all of a sudden we start getting traffic from Europe. Hey, that's great. We have some European readers, and then we're getting these users. Analytics looks good, but then all of a sudden Africa gets on the map, and we get some traffic from Africa, and before we know it, Latin America gets on the map, and before we know it, United States gets on the map, and all of a sudden, we get so much traffic that our web admin gets this blue screen. This is a DDoS attack. So what happened is we got a denial of service attack. Essentially, when we set up our website, we set up a small website. We expected maybe 100 users per second, 100 QPS. But then what happened is we started getting all this traffic from all around the world, all of a sudden, maybe at the QPS level, that's 10 times, 100 times the capacity that we had. The way DDoS attacks work is the traffic originates from computers that are infected, mostly by viruses, that don't do anything to your computer, so it goes undetected. But it's controlled by a person, a black hat hacker, who's got a button in his hand, and he can control all of these computers to go to a certain website whenever he wants. And since the virus is distributed uniformly across the globe, all of these computers are across the globe, and then they can create traffic for your website, not necessarily to read the content, just to create traffic so that the real users cannot access the real content. So with that, let me give you a little demo. It's called Digital Attack Maps. My teammates built it. This shows the real DDoS traffic around the globe. If it loads. So this is the real traffic. The traffic is anonymized, and it's being pulled from around 270 ISPs from around the world. It's pulled every hour. We get the data from Arbor Networks. And we put this data into this visualization so that we can show the world and the people the size of the DDoS attacks that's happening at the time, real time. At the bottom, we have this graph which shows you the size. So you can see how much DDoS traffic every day we get in the world. And I don't know if you can see it very well, but the direction of the animation shows you where the traffic is originating from and where it's going to. You cannot always tell where the DDoS traffic is coming from, but for the ones that we can tell, we show you the origin and the destination. It's our experience at Google that DDoS attacks are becoming more of the norm than an exception. Unfortunately, going forward, any website, commercial or non-commercial, will have to take a note of those attacks, especially if you have something to say that some people don't want it to be heard. You will have more of it than any other website. I want to show you a particularly bad day. Earlier today, I was playing with it, and I found this day, which is August 25th, around August 25th. So if you look at it, this is the DDoS traffic that the United States has received. There was nothing specific happening on that day, but sometimes DOS traffic correlates with some laws are passed by the lawmakers, controversial laws mostly, or some country making a decision about acting on some other country. Cool. So let's go back to our slide, and then let's take a look at how, if we wanted to create some DOS traffic, let's say that we're a hacker, how we can find this DOS traffic. If we can play the video. So this is a real video. I searched this on YouTube. I said, buy DDoS, and this is what came up. Unfortunately, their website doesn't work. So maybe it's being DDoSed by other people. But this is how easy it is. And on eBay, we found instances of DDoS services that you can buy for $100. We checked it up earlier today. It was not there, so eBay had taken it down. But that's the case. So the question is this. There are services, some people give DDoS attack, but who actually attacks? This is from Akamai's website, and I'm just going to read you, without any further comment, what they say right here. These types of attacks can originate from a variety of sources, including hacktivists, for-profit hackers, state-sponsored hacking groups, and others. In many cases, DDoS attacks leverage the force of multiplication, etc. It goes on. This is a real threat, and this is a real threat for you, for the news that you're trying to consume, and for the freedom of speech. With that, I would like to give you a little bit technical background on this. How do you do, if you wanted to be a black hat hacker, and if you wanted to do a DOS attack, how do you do this? There is a particularly interesting one called Slow Loris attack. This came about in 2012. It was unrevealed in 2012. We don't know whether it was used beforehand, but we figured out that it was being used in 2012. Usually, when you do a DDoS attack, you need a lot of machines. As the map that I showed you, it's all around the world, and then you just send a lot of traffic from all these machines. In this case, you need only one machine to take down the web server. The machine opens many connections, but it doesn't close the connections to the web server. So the program that runs on your computer, let's say that you're the attacker. The goal of the attacker is to go to a web server and then open a connection saying, hey, I want to get this, this resource, this web page, but then send some parameters and never really close, like keep the connection open with some junk. With that, you can easily make sure that the web server is running out of connections. So the web servers usually have a limited number of connections. If the web server is Nginx, for example, it keeps the connections as a file on the file system, and the file system has usually, by default, 65K limit. It comes from the operating system. So you can run out of that limit, and you can get to that blue screen easily. If you want to try this, you can go to GitHub, and then there's this awesome Slow Loris implementation in Go, which is the language that Google implemented. And then these are the features, fantastic features. Users as low network bandwidth as possible. What that means is you can DDoS attack some website and still read the news online. And if you want to learn more about it, go on YouTube and search for Slow Loris attack DDoS. And there are a lot of edtech videos that will teach you how to do Slow Loris attack. So it's easy to do DDoS, and there are a lot of websites out there who are started usually by the default parameters of Apache or Nginx web servers, which actually make them quite vulnerable to DDoS attacks. This is a command by one of the websites that we protected during the conflict times. Sergey said, I was working 24/7. I did not leave home. I was sleeping near my desk with the monitors running with statistics, graphs, analyzers, and reports about our anti-DDoS tools. It's a big deal when you have something that you want to put up on your newspaper site and you're getting attacked, and we can protect you and we can make your voice heard. Our biggest value added, besides protecting these websites, is to actually help these web admins to set up their web servers in the correct way. Most of the time, they may not know what the most recent technology out there to protect their own website. So, what is Project Shield? This is the straw man definition of Project Shield. Here's the internet. There's a big cloud. And we have a bunch of VMs that run a reverse proxy for our customers, meaning that we can use all sorts of algorithms and in addition to our network bandwidth to protect the content of our customers. The one thing I can tell you about it in this graph is we launched Project Shield about 6 months ago as a beta test. And after running it for a little while, we rewrote the whole thing. And we're about to relaunch our version 2 in the upcoming weeks, months. And we're very excited about it. In our beta program, we were able to protect quite a few websites, about 250 users, including election websites. Election websites gets DDoSed. It's a phenomenon of the modern world. If you search Project Shield Google ideas, this is the website that you're going to get. You can apply to be on Project Shield. This application goes to our beloved product manager, CJ Adams. And then we go through the websites and we verify that you stand for freedom of speech and you're an independent newspaper or you're an NGO that is in need of DDoS protection. And then once we sign you up on our site, you're protected by Google against DDoS attacks. So with that, I'd like to pass the microphone to Yasmin.
I actually have a microphone.
Actually, I don't know how to pass it.
Yeah, one microphone too many for me. So thanks so much. Thanks for kind of coming tonight and hearing us talk about our work at Google Ideas. We spoke about uProxy, which is a browser extension to help friends kind of share their internet experience, and Shield, which is our effort to give independent media, human rights advocates, and election monitoring sites a first line of defense against DDoS attacks. We do have ways for you to get involved. We saw earlier that you can contribute directly to uProxy because it's an open source project. Or if you have friends or family in one of those countries, I think honestly it's like 100+ countries in the world where there's some type of repression, then please do try and install uProxy. It's kind of an alpha, so it's buggy. So we'd really be grateful for you to test it and give us some feedback. If you know any websites that fall into those categories, again, that's independent media, human rights advocacy, or election monitoring, please let them know about Project Shield because we'd like to protect them.